Mic check, mic check.
Good, thank you.
Jordan, if you can shut that door, I think we're going to get started. Melissa, wave again if you can hear us. Good. So we actually have 2 out of the 3 guests. Unfortunately, Larry wouldn't be able to join us today because he's going to be traveling. So let me introduce myself. My name is Juan Wilson. I'm known as J. Juan. My alter ego is J. Juan. Also the founder of the MUSE Foundation of Rhode Island. And I wanted to put this project together in collaboration with Venture Cafe. Thanks Toonie, Jordan, and Amy, the team. They have this series called The Future of. And so we decided to do the future of Black philanthropy and creative giving. So that's why you have the guests that I've selected, Bannerman-Ankoma from Rhode Island Foundation. We have Melissa Husband from Secretary of State's office. And we had Larry from United Way. This is just going to be a general conversation. It's not going to be so formal as a panel. This is more of speaking on building and generalizing Black philanthropy. Because I'm actually what I call a first-generation philanthropist in my family. Most of the time, my family didn't have the means to give. That's time or donation. So I'm trying to establish that with the foundation for communities of color, right? So that they can actually understand philanthropy on different levels, right? So it's not always in this higher level in a certain class of folks and that white construct, right? We do give in our community, and they might not see it as philanthropy. So that's kind of what this discussion is about, generalizing it and letting people know something I'm going to quote Angie from, which is time, talent, and treasure, right? 3 different T's that I really believe in, meaning I give a lot of time. Most people know. I give talent and occasionally treasure because I am cheap. but I won't say cheap. I'm frugal. But I want to give as much as I can as far as my skill set, my knowledge, as well as my donor dollars to the community, and let them know they can also be a part of that, of one of the 3 T's. So, can you hear me? Can you hear me better now? Sorry. I'm going to hold it up. There we go. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Angie introduce herself. So, we're going to start with Angie.
Good evening, everyone. Can y'all hear me? Is this on?
You might have to hold it up a little bit.
Good evening, everyone. Angie Bannerman-Ankoma. I've been with the Rhode Island Foundation for about 8, maybe 9 months now. I was previously, in my title or role there is Vice President of Equity Leadership. I was previously at the United Way of Rhode Island for 3 years. And at the United Way of Rhode Island, I was Executive Vice President of Community Investment. I always like to joke and say the development team raised the money and I spent the money. But before getting into philanthropy, I was in state government for about 10 years. I worked in the Rhode Island Department of Health for about a decade. And so that's just pretty much about me. Sums me up.
That's Angie's modest, and Angie's kind of one of the cheerleaders of getting me into this space, as well as Melissa. They've been my advisors and cheerleaders as I move forward in the nonprofit sector and now moving forward more into philanthropy. So I'm going to let Melissa, if you want to introduce yourself.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. So I apologize. Do you hear the echo or is it just me?
You might hear a little bit of an echo because it's coming through your speaker, but it's good.
Okay, good. So I apologize for not being there today. I am in Poughkeepsie, New York, with my family doing college visits. So yay, it's been quite an experience so far. But I'm really happy that Juan asked me to be a part of this conversation. Currently, I am the Deputy Secretary of State for Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea at the Office of the Secretary of State, and I've been in this position for approximately 4 years. In this role, I oversee all of the Secretary's program divisions, which I won't necessarily go through. I think the one that I'm going to be talking about most is business services, because that's where registration for social enterprises and nonprofits happen. And we have a very large amount of tools that we provide to nonprofit organizations in regards to being able to start and maintain those organizations. I'm also a member of the Black Philanthropy Bannister Fund, which is through the Rhode Island Foundation. I've been on that fund for about 2 years. it has been a wonderful experience for me because when the fund was first established many years ago, I contributed to the fund because I really believed in the impact that it was set out to have on the Black community, but I also knew that I wanted to leave a legacy beyond my contributions that I was already providing in the community through my time. So through the Black Philanthropy Bannister Fund, I help to push money into nonprofits that are doing creative work in the Black community. And I also give money for scholarships for those in our community who are looking towards careers in the healthcare field. So those, I believe, are the two reasons that I am on this panel. And I think the third reason is because prior to me being at the Secretary of State's office, I was the executive director of Community Action Partnership of Providence, which is an anti-poverty organization that served underrepresented communities. And we tried often to be able to find creative ways to do programming and to impact those communities. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation, and I'm going to mute myself as much as possible because there is some background noise here in the hotel. So Juan, thank you so much. And I am very excited to be on this, a part of this conversation with my best friend, Angie Ankoma, looking fabulous, by the way.
You're making me blush.
All right, so can you hear me? Just want to make sure you can hear me. Cool, cool. No, so thank you, ladies, for being with me, or my Black queens, as I say. I really appreciate my sisters. They've been very, like I said, very supportive in this venture. And just, like I said, being in the nonprofit sector, coming from the for-profit, I don't see them as two different things. I actually see one as tax exempt and the other not, because self-sustainability is what's important. And that's something why I brought also Melissa in, not just on philanthropy, but just creative ways and nonprofits, right? Just things we don't see here for communities of color in our state or our city, but there are some best practices throughout the country that we can actually bring here. She mentioned the Black Philanthropy Fund. So Neil and I have been having our coffees, conversations. So Neil Steinberg from Rhode Island Foundation. Um, and we're trying to continue this conversation he used to have with my cousin, the late Michael Van Leesten. And Mike had introduced me to Neil when I first got into nonprofits. And so hopefully I'm going to take over that coffee hour with him and just explore the world of philanthropy. But we've had some real candid conversations as far as Black philanthropy, or even touching on the BIPOC. But right now I'm focused on the B. I'm a mixture of both. Like I said, so I'm Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. But what happens is a lot of us are pulled in. Whenever we do a Black initiative or African American initiative, it always has to be pulled in with another group. No offense to the other groups, but right now for the month of August, we're highlighting African American nonprofits, and the mayor signed a proclamation recognizing August as Black Philanthropy Month. This is something that's recognized globally. He's the first city in New England to actually recognize it. Um, and so I want to commend Mayor Jorge Aloza, and he actually signed the proclamation on Emancipation Day, August 1st. So right now we are in the 5 days in to, oh, you have it on hand? Thank you. We are 5 days in to Black Philanthropy Month here in Providence, Rhode Island. So if we can give a round of applause for Mayor Aloza for that. So I'm going to get into the questions. So I'm going to give the first question is to Angie and then to Melissa. How does your current position in the organization play a role in Black philanthropy specifically? For you, Ange, first.
Sure. This is much better. You can hear me, right? Great, good. So what my position, I didn't go into a little, when I introduced myself, I didn't go into my role at the foundation. It's a newly created role, and it's really focusing on supporting leaders of color across our state. And I'm sure many of you who identify as a person of color know when we're sitting at different tables, particularly decision-making tables, we're often one of the few, if not the only one at those decision-making tables. And so Rhode Island Foundation decided to invest in a leadership initiative to ensure that there's more of us in leadership positions. How do we support one another? How do we create access? And so we are launching, as we speak, a leadership initiative called the Equity Leadership Initiative for People of Color. And so when you ask, how does that connect to my role? I think, I think when you think about philanthropy, it's really the love of mankind. And I would say that nobody loves people more than Black people, right? We love, we love each other, we love other people, and Jay talked about, how to give your time, treasure, and talent. And I think in order for us to be able to be given more of the treasure, I think we need to be on financial footing economically as well too. And so that means we have to have roles where we have high paying roles, decision making roles, where we can make influence on some of those decisions as well too. And so, my hope and aspiration is that we see with the Equity Leadership Initiative is that in a number of years, not only Black people, but other people who identify as people of color and mixed race are in position of decision making authorities. We are the superintendents, the governors, the mayors, the doctors, the lawyers. And so that's my hope and aspiration. And they can say that, the Equity Leadership Initiative opened doors and pathways. One of the things that's been really humbling to me throughout this process of developing initiative and also meeting people across the state is that it has been a welcome opportunity. We had about several information sessions while we were during the application process, and people just said thank you, right? People are looking for that opportunity. And so I refuse to believe that there are people in our state, people who identify people of color in our state who aren't talented. We have an incredible amount of talent in our state. And so people are looking for opportunity. They're knocking on doors or breaking down doors. And so my hope is that through this opportunity, we can increase the access and increase the visibility of people of color as well too. Right? We have that, a handful of people that everyone always calls on, but we know that there are more who are talented, who do have something to give and to contribute. And so I think through those opportunities, through that networking, we will be able to help and support people to increase our giving. This is not to say that we don't give. I do think that we're really generous, and I'm sure there'll be a question to talk about what Black philanthropy looks like in our state. But I think that oftentimes, there's a study that happened that was produced a couple of years ago, and it talked about in Boston, not necessarily Rhode Island. It talked about the wealth of Black people in Boston. I mean, the wealth of people in Boston, and then, if I remember correctly, the wealth of white people in Boston was $250,000, and the wealth of Black people in Boston was $8. Right, and so while that's right next door, I can't imagine that there's much difference in our state here, Rhode Island. And so we need to change that. In order for us to be philanthropic in terms of our money, we need to be able to be in positions where we can actually earn wealth in our communities.
Thank you, Angie. Melissa, you want to answer the same question? You want me to repeat it?
Could you please? Yes, because I was listening to Angie, so I got totally lost in what the question was.
So the question is, how does your current position and organization play a role in Black philanthropy specifically?
So I think for my job as deputy secretary, I think how it plays a role specifically is around what opportunities our communities have to fill gaps. So often we talk to young entrepreneurs, we talk to young folks who are looking to fill these gaps that they see in their own communities. And as a way to give back, they want to be able to open up a nonprofit. They want to be able to do some type of social enterprise. They want to look into what co-op nonprofit opportunities there are, because so often we see lack of leadership in our communities, or we see that the leadership that does exist has a very different understanding of the needs that other parts of our community have, right? So our office has done a really great job to be able to walk people through that process. And I know on the surface, it sounds fairly simple, but you would be surprised at how many people are totally sold on the idea and has totally thought out the idea of filling that need, but has no real understanding of how to maintain it and what protections they need in order to make sure that the vision and the passion and the drive and that need is served long term. And so our job is to make sure that if you set up a social enterprise, that you have an understanding of what your intellectual property rights are. That is important. You want to make sure that you're not exposing yourself unnecessarily and having to battle, legal battles in court because you weren't paying attention to that intellectual property piece. Our office walks folks through what that looks like. We also walk people through what some of their actual options are around starting that nonprofit. You know, too often we have people come in who say, I want to start a nonprofit, but they haven't really done the research on what types of nonprofits they want to focus on. You know, I was excited to work with Juan on starting his foundation. We talked a lot about what the structure was going to look like, why that particular structure made sense. And so he was savvy enough to ask those questions. But 9 times out of 10, the Black community, they have wonderful thoughts of how to support their communities, but really no true understanding of that process. The other thing that we're there for is the support. Again, that maintenance part is vital because we believe in your mission. We believe in the needs of the community and that they need to be served in as many ways, in avenues as possible. So we are, as an office, there to be able to walk people through those opportunities. On the other side, when it comes to the Black Philanthropy Bannister Fund, I think for me, it is again that legacy piece. It's important to me to look at applications from nonprofits and really look at how they're truly impacting our Black community. So often we've had organizations that will make submissions that are saying that the impact is there. But when you really dig into some of these nonprofits, the reality is that it's not genuinely impacting the Black community as it should. And so it's important, as someone who has run a nonprofit, who knows what kinds of questions to ask, who knows what I should be looking for to ensure that the dollars, the very minimal dollars that we invest in our community, are genuinely being put in the areas that we know the need truly is. So I would say those are the 2 ways for me.
Thank you, Melissa. So before I go on to the next question, can you all hear me? 'Cause I know I talk low. Um, just on my part, on what I'm doing, Melissa mentioned my foundation, the MUSE Foundation. So Angie also and Melissa have been advising me, and this is from scratch. One of the things I didn't want to do is form another nonprofit because I hear that we have so many nonprofits here. But some of the functions that I want to do, I have to establish a nonprofit. Um, but one of the things and one of my goals is to take that 80-20 and that 80% being grant dependent. I want to flip it on its head and be more self sustaining. So when Melissa mentioned intellectual property, um, that's one of the things I do on my for profit. So we do music publishing, I have software patents and where we also have residuals coming in. And instead of donating it from my portion, I'm actually setting up the foundation to have its own publishing so it can have stake in some of my IP. So even if I'm not part of the foundation, there'll still be some revenue coming into the space. So that's leading to the creative giving, like looking at other spaces. And then as far as the nonprofit sector, saying there's so many nonprofits, it's so many that are doing the same, right? Or in that same system. Even when we talk about philanthropy, there's different levels. This is not dumbing it down. This is just leveling up. And what Melissa said as well, alluding to giving that support. So you start at one level and get to another, right? So um, one of the conversations I had with Neil was access to the general Black population that is not, say, the philanthropy fund, or we take for granted we're in these circles and that we work in this industry. We speak even the acronyms and everything else and assume that others know it. And Neil had mentioned to me, well, Juan, we accept $25 donations. And I'm like, when have you solicited that you get $25 donations to the foundation? But they do accept that, right? So my thing is that it is accessible for folks to give at lower minimums to a foundation like the Bannister. Is it Banneker or Bannister? Bannister Fund. Um,
Yep.
which is one of the funds, right? And I think Rhode Island Foundation has 1,800 funds, on the website. We'll look at the website; it says it on there, right? And then there's a few other Black philanthropy funds with some names that are in there, as well as the Bannister Fund, and they also collaborate to that one. I'm under. I'm actually on. I have a campaign now to try to raise funds for a foundation for Muse, a Muse fund, and so we can have another fund that's also managed. And one of the goals is I want to raise the funds and give the funds based on the communities of color, right? And the leadership program that Angie's putting through. I was in some of the info sessions, and some folks they were brand new, right? They want to know how to do this, and I was happy that Angie's leading this because she's really grassroots as well as on this level. So Angie can be on all the levels and not coming from here. And she has that mother mentality and just that support. And so she's, even during the info sessions, she was still learning on ways to adapt this to make this more accessible for the applicants. And so I really appreciate when I sat in the first session, what she was providing. So, but I like, it's definitely different levels, and that's kind of what I'm trying to bring with this conversation, is that it doesn't always have to be here. We can start here and build up, and still figure out those ways that we can give back. So I'm going to go to the next question.
If I can,
No, go ahead, Angie.
you talked about the model of your the MUSE Foundation. I wanted to kind of speak a little bit about the Rhode Island Foundation in terms of its structure and how it works. And I didn't know about it. I figured, I just understood they gave out money like every other philanthropic organization does. And so Rhode Island has one community foundation, and community foundations, there's about 1,800 across the country. And so the Community Foundation, Rhode Island Foundation, founded in 1916, I believe in 1914 was the first community foundation that was founded in Cleveland. And essentially, wealthy people put their money together and they invested it, and then the interest off of that is what gets granted out every year. And so Rhode Island Foundation has $1 billion in assets, meaning this money is invested, and the money that we give away is the money that is the interest off of those investments. And so making sound investments is a critical part of the Rhode Island Foundation. And when Jay's talking about using some of his IP and his intellectual property to invest, to be able to give out to the community, that's a different way of doing foundations, which is very different from the way the United Way does their philanthropy, which is they do an annual campaign, which they go to companies and everybody gives a certain amount of dollars out of their check every week, or people just write a lump sum. And so those are the differences between United Way and the Rhode Island Foundation, which is the only community foundation in the state of Rhode Island. So I wanted to explain that because it's really, if you're not in the fields, it's hard to understand the differences between the two. And so, but one thing is, while we say there's $1 billion in assets, people think that we should be giving away tons of money every year, right? We can't give it all away, or else we wouldn't have any to give away. Another part of it is, Jay was talking about the number of other foundations within the foundation. And so we don't control 100% of those assets. Some of those assets are controlled by family foundations. And so if I have $10,000, I can create a family foundation at the Rhode Island Foundation, and I can give that money every year. There are like 1,800 different ones of that nature at the Rhode Island Foundation. And so while we have $1 billion of assets, we don't give those away every year, and we give about $80 million away every year. We control about 70% of those assets, right? And so 30% of that is what we can say, okay, we can grant out to this person, we can grant out to that person. But the rest of it is, let's say Jay has a family foundation at the Rhode Island Foundation. They say, okay, Jay's family foundation wants to give money to the food bank, or et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to explain that just so that you give a little bit more background. And when you're talking about the numbers, how much we can actually, how much we take in, how much we give out, and how much is really under control. And the family foundations, they're called donor advised funds. Right, so those donors advise where those funds should go.
Thank you, Angie. Yeah, thank you, Angie, for explaining that, because that's so that unless you know like even the community foundation, I didn't recognize Rhode Island Foundation as a community foundation until doing some research and seeing actually it's on the 990, and then talking to Neil and explaining that, and understanding that Angie's community and then some of the other her colleagues I know have been in banking. They're attorneys, so they're really about growing funds and investing funds, and that's why I'm looking at creating a fund to help them manage, because they're good at growing dollars, right? They're good at investing, and then I want to hopefully play with the committee more than an advisory role on how we raise the funds to put in for you to grow, and then also how we allocate those funds afterwards. So hopefully, I'm working on a collaboration with Rhode Island Foundation and others, even United Way, just to be creative, look at creative ways that we can grow philanthropy in our community. So I'm going to lead to the next question. So the next question is, how can community assist Black philanthropy with growth, participation, and awareness? Go ahead, Melissa. You take that first so she can see.
I think there are a lot of ways that the Black community can assist. I mean, I think the biggest piece, again, to many things is educating our community about what it is, how it functions, and what the impact is. So often in the Black community, we are givers, as Angie said earlier. We give our time, we give our energy, we give our money. It just looks very different for us. We give in tithes. We do bake sales, we do lemonade stands. We give in so many ways. We make contributions to clothing closets. I mean, we give in so many meaningful ways, and those are all really great ways, but they're right now ways. And so I think for philanthropy, it's more of a long-term investment in your community. And I think that's where we have to make sure that our community understands what that means. It means that, yes, as Angie was expressing, the money is put in, you put $100 in, that $100 will grow over time. It will grow beyond you. And the only piece of that that's going to be put out into your community is that interest. So your money will continue to grow within your community for your children, for your grandchildren over time. And so I think that we really need to do a better job in educating our community on what it means to long-term invest in our communities and how that shows up. Because so often in the Black Philanthropy Bannister Fund meetings, we go back and forth on the $100 and something thousand a year that we end up giving for scholarships. There is no better feeling than to be able to bless our Black and brown girls and boys with a scholarship to live out their dreams. And you, with that $100, you are contributing to their dream. You are contributing to the betterment of our community. You are contributing to the representation that is needed and necessary in so many fields across the country. And so when we talk about philanthropy, when we talk about Black philanthropy, we need to make it real for people. We need to make it make sense and make people recognize and realize that it can be as simple as $50. It doesn't have to be that $10,000. You can give to your church and you can give to the Black Philanthropy Bannisters Fund. So you can give now and you can still give down the line. So I think it's really education around why this matters, why it matters today for you to invest so that your children can take advantage of it tomorrow. So I think that's the biggest piece.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. So it's how can the community assist Black philanthropy with growth, participation, and awareness?
And I know both you and Melissa mentioned that, we can give $25 or $50. Believe it or not, we have people who mail $1 to the Rhode Island Foundation, right? Because they want to contribute something to that. I had, and I think it's whatever you can give and however much you can give, I think is significant as well too. And then Melissa talked about tithe, and how we measure. I think a lot of it is how we measure philanthropy in how we measure philanthropy in general. We talk about the money, but we don't talk about the time. We give time to our neighbors, time to our family members, time to the organizations that we value and are really near and dear to our heart. And so really measuring that time, there's certain organizations that actually measure the number of hours you contribute and also put a dollar amount to it, because if anything, time is more valuable than money, because once you lose time, you can't get that back, right? And so I think being able, when we think about philanthropy, I think philanthropy also needs to really reconsider how we also measure how, not just money, but also the time and also the talent that you bring as well too. I serve on a nonprofit board for over 10 years, West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation, and I've served for over 10 years. And if I were paid for every hour that I've spent there, that's invaluable, right? And so really think about, if I can't give that dollar today, the time that you can serve on organizations with your talent and your treasure. And you'd be amazed. There are nonprofit organizations across the state of Rhode Island that just need your voice. They need our voices at the table. They're critical. And so, that's how we can contribute in our voices and making sure that we're there. There's a saying that, if you're not at the decision making table, you're on a plate being served. And so making sure that we're at those various decision making tables, because if you look at the landscape of nonprofit organizations in Rhode Island, they do not represent us. The leadership doesn't represent us. The decision-making tables don't represent us. Even the donors, the people who donate to the nonprofit organizations, don't represent us. And so we have to figure out our way, whether it be at the decision-making table, the board, and in leadership positions. I think it's time. It's actually overdue that we are at those tables, helping to make sure that we influence those decisions that are made in our communities.
Thank you, Angie. And I want to elaborate more on what Angie was talking about, as far as the lack of representation when we talk about leadership on boards. I've also served on the same board with Angie at West Elmwood. I love the work they're doing and what they're doing in the community. So believing in the board you sit on, that's one, and the committee that you also work with. I sit on other committees because they also have this 100% giving for board members. Doesn't mean you have to give a significant amount, but they want to make sure that everyone gives back something. But I value my time more than anything. So I said I'm frugal with my dollars because I allocate it. We budget it every year, but then it's my time. You know what I'm saying? And my time is valuable, so I'll put time in, even in doing this, right? Like this is taking time, and I appreciate Angie and Melissa from a distance, and then all of y'all to come and attend and devote the time to it. And so to get into the future part of it, um, one of the things we mentioned as far as like dollar amounts, and I didn't know they would send $1 to Rhode Island Foundation, and until it goes in. But one of the things that I'm actually exploring with the MUSE Foundation, one of our initiatives is called Awesome PVD, and we give out $1,000 a month to applicants that apply for the programs. I'm partial to youth and technology programs, just to let you know. But it's a group of trustees that donate $100 a month. We pool it together, and then we vote once a month, who, based on the applicants, who to award it. We've awarded 3 so far. I'm actually awarding the 4th next Thursday, and someone says, Juan, that's not going into the foundation. It's going in and then out, right? And I said, yeah, that's a different. I'm not trying to make anything off this. I'm trying to bring awareness to programs that might not apply for traditional grants, because this is kind of seed money, right? This is their first time applying for a grant. We just recently developed a rubric, right? We have a guide on how to fill out the application. All this was under development as we're moving forward. I don't want to sit still and then try to come up with the perfect plan, then launch it. So what we're doing is getting the feedback from the trustees, getting feedback from the applicants, and we put it out there, right? So now there's a cycle for September, right? And we've been getting less applicants, I think, because it's summer, right? But the more, like now, I'm going to mention it now, awesomepvd.org, we're looking for applicants, right? And so that's one way of bringing awareness to smaller projects, and also getting rid of some of the jitters of a project that might not apply for a traditional grant because they feel like they're not going to, not be able to get. They don't they don't want to hear no, or they just don't feel prepared to apply. So we're kind of using this to teach the applicant, and is also to seed a new program. So I'm going to get on to the next question. You're going to start with this, Angie. You ain't passing it off. What best practices have you seen and wish were implemented in Rhode Island as far as Black philanthropy initiatives, programs?
I'm going to talk about two things. One is something, an interaction I had yesterday, which I think left a memorable impression on me. Another thing is I talked a little bit about how we measure, how we look at donors. You know, does it mean that if you donate $1, you're a donor? And so nationally, there's been a movement for quite some time called giving circles. And once I describe it, various cultures are familiar with it, where people pretty much pool money into a pot. And then the group, if there's 10 people who put $10 in, they decide where that $100 goes to in terms of a nonprofit. And I think it's a really innovative way of engaging people, having them at the decision-making table. And something that Juan talked about just a few seconds ago is it gets the jitters out of applying for a larger grant. And oftentimes the grants that are larger, often it's harder for groups that are led by organizations that are led by people of color. It's intimidating, right? I cut my teeth on writing grants, just sort of like riding a bike. I wrote a couple, got a couple of no's, and I got a couple of yeses, right? And so I think applying for the first grant kind of gives you that courage, and having to be able to speak about the work that you're doing in the community. And so I think giving circles is an innovative and I think a model that engages donors that traditionally don't think about engaging with philanthropic organizations. And so at the Rhode Island Foundation, we've been working on giving circles over the past couple of months, and In coming months, we're going to be launching one for Black donors. And the model that we're developing includes asking donors who identify as people who identify as Black people to give $250. And once you give that $250, you gather with a group of people and determine where that money goes, that resource goes to. Rhode Island Foundation has decided to match that $250. And so if you give $250, that means you really have $500. The group has $500 in each person. So if somebody gives $500, it really is $1,000 for the group, and so on and so forth. And I want to say that we started outreaching to people in the community about it. And you'd be amazed. Like, people don't ask. One of the things that people don't ask Black people for money because they often assume that we're on the receiving end of getting money, right? And there wasn't one person that I spoke to directly that didn't say, absolutely, sign me up. Not one person. In fact, I was just explaining it to a couple people and it's like, sign me up. I didn't even ask. It was like, sign me up. Right? Because oftentimes we may not have a lot. That's one thing too about the data that says about people, communities of color and philanthropy. Communities of color are more philanthropic with the limited resources that they have than people who are wealthy. So the little bit of like the $1.50 we got, we're willing to give away 75. Right? And so there wasn't one person who we asked to give to the Black Giving Circle who said no. And then we're also starting one with Latinos. And every single person said, sign me up, yes. And in fact, I'm telling my friend and my sisters are coming as well too. So it's been really encouraging because we know what philanthropy means in our community. Like, Melissa said, every church has a building fund, right? Every church has a building fund, and people give and give to that. People are willing to give to that. And so it is really incredible to see how people are stepping up in our community right here in Rhode Island. And again, it's not people who are making 6 and 7 figure salaries. It's people who are really working class people who are giving. And so I want to say that is future. And we're looking at doing other giving circles as well too, and looking at how we can support members of the community and be able to give and to be able to change not only the perception but also the visibility of who is a donor and who can give and who has the capacity to give. Another thing I wanted to talk about.
Good.
I know you had me on a roll. I didn't want to talk.
That's what you're here for.
The other thing is, I had a conversation with a group of young women yesterday at the YWCA. They were like girls between the ages of 10 and about 12, 13. And I talked to them about what I do at work, and it's kind of hard to like philanthropy. What is that, right? And so I kind of broke it down to them, like, what are you passionate about? And people talked about issues. The girls talked about issues they were passionate about. And I said, well, if you had $1,000, what would you give it to? And you would be amazed what these girls said. Like, I was blown away. Like, the reason, like, when people come to me to ask for money, one girl was like, when I go to my grandmother's house in Philadelphia, I notice there's a lot of abandoned houses and people who don't have a place to stay. So if you gave me $1,000, I would get people together and I would fix up those houses for people to live in. Right? And somebody says, I really care about the environment and I want to make sure that we have money to clean the water and clean the ocean. Like, these are things that we, like, philanthropic organizations give to. And they had a list. And as a matter of fact, they moved beyond giving to, how do I make sure that my money lives beyond, or my items live beyond me? And I said, well, that's a will. And that's how we get some money too. And it was like, okay, so I'm going to do a will. So I had 11-year-old girls talk about how they're going to tell their families what they're going to be. I was like, what are you going to do? I want to make sure they said, I want to make sure my cell phone goes to my sister, my shoes goes to my, they were beyond their age. And so the second thing that I would add in terms of innovation is making sure that we engage youth in philanthropy early. Because the youth knew exactly what they were passionate about, exactly the way they would give. And I think it also engages them in how to think critically about different issues in their community. They talked about homelessness, housing, income disparities, education, you name it. All the things that we invest in philanthropy. And so it was really humbling to know that these young, amazing girls were on it. And once they figured out what philanthropy was, they were on it. And so, a couple of years, I told them, I said, in a couple of years, I might see them as a donor. And I said, would they trust me as a donor to give their money to? And I got a couple of votes of people who give me their money in the future. So I think, engaging youth and making sure that we change the face of who is a donor and who is a receiver of the services.
Thank you, Angie. And Angie also alluded on the youth. So I'm gonna plug Awesome PVD again. There's no age limit. So I'm always encouraging youth to also apply for this, right? So if they have an idea and they have something they can put through, we also accept youth. We actually the grant we awarded this month is for mini entrepreneurship fair. I think they're from ages 5 to 7. They're hosting the fair in Warwick this Saturday, and they want to bring it to Providence. So we actually awarded this program so they can actually build the curriculum and bring it into Providence. She's going to do it annually, but her first one is actually uh, this Saturday, and it's introducing young folks into entrepreneurships. They might not be business owners and entrepreneurs later on, but it definitely gives them life skills early. And so we believe in that program. That's a proactive program. Speaking on what Angie was just speaking, and that's Rosie's girls, and I love that program because they're thinking about it, right? So now, how do we keep feeding that and seeding that, so that they actually understand financial literacy also includes giving, right, and also includes philanthropy. It's not just about managing your budget; it's also how you give back in the community. You want to make that, a part of financial literacy and letting them know that and understand that. One of the issues that I ran into growing up in the community is immediate gratification, right? So in our community, we tend to want things right away, and that's why I love that the fact Melissa spoke on long term. So understanding that there are different levels to your short term goals, midterm goals, and long term goals. Not everything is short term. One of the things I was growing up in the house, and my mom wants to go to Rent-A-Center. I said, why are you paying all that money? Because they wanted it now, right? The same thing with buy here, pay here for cars. They wanted it now. And then I seen computers. I'm like, you're paying $5,000 for a $500 computer because you want to do it $20 a week. And so just understanding that if you're better off saving, you can save in a couple of months, pay and own it outright. So using those models, and I grew up in those models, right? And so and no one taught me on to question that, right? I started questioning it myself. So, and then the Giving Circles, if you want to contribute to the Giving Circles at Rhode Island Foundation, I was searching the website, and that's actually on the website. So I think it's already open for both the Latino and the Black Giving Circle. So it is open on the website. I also want to make sure I plug in the applications, right, Melissa, are open the for the Black Philanthropy Fund.
For the grant, yes.
Yep,
Yep, through, I think, yeah, for I think another few weeks.
I think till September 9th. So I'm
Yep.
just doing my homework, going through the sites, and we also have a resource guide. If you go to museofri.org, I have a resource guide that Melissa had put together from Rhode Island Department of Nellie Gobea's department. So it's giving you some resources on social enterprise, nonprofits, what those steps are. I also have a list of BIPOC nonprofits. I have about 95 that I identified run by BIPOC. There's a list of the agencies, who the ED is, and their contact. That's also there because some people were asking me, how do I reach out to these organizations? And that's a forever growing one. So if you know any that aren't on the list, definitely let me know. So we're providing that as a resource. And like I said, the creative giving, Awesome PVD is a giving circle, right? That's exactly what it is, a giving circle. We give it out, we award it, and that's just one of the initiatives. And so right now, I'm going to open it up for questions from anyone else. We're done with asking.
I didn't get to answer the question.
I'm sorry.
I'm ready. I was ready to answer the last question. Would you just gonna skip over me?
I'm going to say one thing. This is what they do all the time. They bully me quite often. All right, go ahead, Melissa. I forgot. I'm sorry.
Man, I mean, really?
That's what happens when you're not in the room. I forgot you're behind the screen. Let's go. Go ahead.
All right, I'll try to make it quick since you clearly seem anxious to move on. I actually wanted to suggest giving and getting. You know, so often in the Black community, we love to give. We give our hearts, we give our time, we give our energy, we give our money, but we also don't look for those opportunities to also receive. Right. And so I think that we should start really looking at some ways to both, yes, benefit the community, but also benefit ourselves as individuals. You know, I've seen more and more in Black communities. I've seen investment clubs in the Black community popping up. And that is a fantastic way for you as a collective group of Black people to create an investment club, to invest in yourselves, and then agree that a portion of that goes to a nonprofit or a Black philanthropy fund, or an awesome fund. I think that is a perfect way to be able to give and get. The other way, honestly, I think is through co-ops. You know, we do nonprofit co-ops. Right now, Rhode Island is very limited in the types of co-ops we provide. It's only around agriculture and housing. But I think we should expand as a state on co-ops, because co-ops, yes, it benefits the community again, but as a member, you also receive some of that excessive residual funds. And that those funds can be for you and your family, and you're still giving back to the community. So I think that there are so many models across the country where there is a give, but there's also a get. Too often we forget about ourselves. Too often we give of our talents and don't receive. There is nothing wrong with us capitalizing on what we naturally have. There's nothing wrong with that. Rich people do it every day, right? So there is a way to give and receive at the same time. And then, you know, Juan talked about applicants in this awesome fund. I was a huge proponent of his awesome fund for many reasons. As a person who ran a nonprofit organization, it was painful to have all these amazing ideas as an ED and not being able to actually implement them because they did not fit in these little boxes that funders said, if it doesn't look like this, you can't do it. If it doesn't serve this purpose, you can't do it. And so often I had to fight my way to get funds that were flexible. And so I think, you know, pots of money like the awesome PVD are vital. And we need to continue to look at models that allow for nonprofit leaders to be able to impact communities in a way that they absolutely know is necessary. But they're thinking outside the box oftentimes. And you know what, honestly, to be able to get to the core of issues around poverty, you have to think outside the box. You have to get down to a level where you say, you know what, I get that this funder wants this, but I'm not going to do that because that's not going to benefit my community. So how do I find flexible dollars that allow for me to give my community what it needs, despite what the trends are telling me? So I would say, personally, give and get. Let's give it, but let's get it. There's no reason why we can't kill two birds with one stone. So that's my message to end on, Juan. You can go ahead and open up the questions now.
Thank you for the permission, Melissa. And I definitely I echo exactly what Melissa's saying. It's ironic. Before I started the giving group, I have an investment club. I have with some relatives where we do the investing. I'm not sure if y'all can hear me. This seems a little low. But so and part of that is like what I do with the IP with the publishing. Like I said, I'm willing to invest in the nonprofit and not just giving my money. Like I said, making the nonprofit a partner so that they can actually pull their funds out of what we make. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Anyone got a question? Raise their hand, and this is going to be for one of the two panelists. You got a mic. Thank you, Jordan.
Is this on? Oh, can you hear me? Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Latanya Montero. My daughter and a group of friends of hers have started a nonprofit called She Community. I can't believe you're zooming in on me right now, but anyway, sorry. And it's to uplift and help women of color in this community. And they're just starting the process of creating the nonprofit. So I would love to connect them to you all. And how do I do that?
Well, for me, you can go to museofri.org. Send me an email, and definitely I can connect with you. And even though we receive applications on Awesome PVD, and if you're not awarded, we do look at the other applications. And some of my trustees identify other resources. So if you're not awarded in that round, we could provide you with other resources that you might apply, that you should apply for, or applicable to your application. And then you can also reapply for Awesome PVD the next month. So it's not a one and done. You would be awarded only once a year, but if you have an idea and it doesn't get awarded the first round, you can improve your application and apply the next one. So I'm gonna and definitely encourage the folks to apply at awesomepvd.org, but they can reach out to us at MUSE and we can see what else we can do to give them resources. So that's on my end.
Yeah, and Juan can give you the Black Philanthropy Bannister Fund contact information as well.
I'm at Rhode Island Foundation, so if you look on the website on the staff page, I'm the first picture.
Yeah, I love it. Angie-Ankoma, she's A, and then she's in this bright red, beautiful
As she
uniform.
should be, as she should be.
Proud because the rest of them are real vanilla, and I said, "Oh, I love the color that she brings pop to the organization." So I said, "Look at that, Angie's already defiant just on the directory. Let's go."
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I just had a comment.
You're on. We can hear you. Thank you, Ann. I would have gave him my mic.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Pastor Shane Lee. I have to say that I truly love Melissa's last comment about the give you some and get you some. Um, and in terms of, and I think that, Angie, you brought it up as well, too, that we have to be able to, get to that place of wealth so that we can be at the table in order to give. And one of the things, and I know it's philanthropy and philanthropy month, but a lot of times people will ask, they always have that question at what's in it for me, and that's just because we come from a place where we don't have the bag to be at the giving table. And so sometimes that venture into the world of investment is so locked out, we're so locked out of that. So I would probably say what investments, what parts of the program or what programs in Rhode Island exist to help people get into that. Let's say, even as a black individual, I come into a large sum of money. I don't know anything about investing. I know I shouldn't go spend it all at the shoe store or, fast food and other things like that, but I just don't know A to Z. What is out there that exists to snatch up those people to say, let me begin to introduce you into the world of investing so that you can be a black investor and that you can begin to build wealth? Because that's, even $500 if I come into it, I don't need to spend it on a new suit jacket. This one got a couple of holes in it. I can wear it a few more times, if I just know what else to do with my money.
So I think um, the whole world of philanthropy involves many, many people, and there's a whole group of people who are called wealth managers. I don't have one because I don't have that much money to manage, right? But no, but Pastor Shane, you mentioned, if you've had $500, how do I invest 250 of it? That's a conversation we need to have. And so wealth managers work with people who have wealth and help them how to make those decisions to invest in them. And more times than not, they don't look like us. They aren't in our communities. And so I think you make an incredible point about how do we begin the conversation about investing. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be very little and it grows. Everybody talking about the Bitcoin and all that other stuff. How many of us are invested in that? All these things are happening around us and people are making money off of it, right? We may not have a lot, but even if it's a little, like I always say, if I knew in February that I could invest in Perel, I would have invested in it last year in February. Because you imagine how much money that people are making, like investing in Perel now. Like everybody has like a sanitizer, right? And so I think being able to understand investment and understanding how to invest and ways to invest, I think is critically important for our community. And I think you make a really strong point to that as well too. It doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to have $1 million. No one has to pass away in your family. It can be very, very little. They have these stories about people who make very, very little money but retire and have like millions of dollars because they invested their resources, a little bit of money they had, really wisely. And I think that's a huge gap in our community.
I want to speak on that too, Pastor Lee. That uh, one of the things, you have some fintech out now, which is like the Robinhood. You have the Cash App, and that's kind of introducing folks to penny stocks, right, or mini investing. And it's cool that it's opening our folks to that sector. But it's almost, to me, some of the practices are similar to what I said at Renner Center and everything else, where um, they know that they're making it easy, they're lowering the barriers of entry, but they also not giving the knowledge and giving the education. People are putting money in and not really understanding it. And then when you want to significantly invest, normally the bar is set a little higher, right? So that's what we talk about, just like giving circles, and what Melissa said about the investment clubs. I said, y'all can pool your money together. That 250 out of the 500 with 10 others, that's 2,500. Y'all can invest. Another issue sometimes we have in our community is a trust issue when it comes to that, right? So it's a big thing, and so that's kind of, scared money don't make money. So that's what I'm letting people know, because that's what I do. It's like you take, it's a risk take, right? So you kind of, you pool with your brothers, you pool with your fraternity, your sorority, like these groups, you put these infinity groups together, and then they decide to create these investment clubs, because you already have a certain amount of trust, and you start off with a certain amount of money, and then as you grow it, you invest it. But one of the things in our community is a trust factor. Like, it's like, I don't know, because I'm pretty sure some of us have invested and got taken, right? Because the person we knew didn't really know what they were doing, or they had ill intentions. But we got to get past that. Otherwise, we're always going to be scared and timid to jump into that. I don't say put your life savings in, but definitely test the waters, and really set up a brokerage account and work with a financial advisor or wealth advisor as a group if you can't do it individually. And you can experiment. My son's 22. Robinhood, now he's on to really having this brokerage account, and he's actually changed his major in school to go to into finance, because he's always been good with money. And but Robinhood kind of just gave him the introductory into financial management, but he wants to learn more, and they're not giving him enough, so he's venturing off. So I do recommend, like you said, is what do I get if I'm giving, right? So there's two ends to that coin, definitely. Thank you, thank you.
And I think some of these investment clubs, they're not labeled investment clubs, but they exist informally within our community. You know, I was part of something called Susu. And anybody familiar with Susu? Yeah. Yep. Susu. I think it's a Haitian word. I think Haitians. I was a member of a Haitian Susu. No, actually, I was a Nigerian one. But anyway, it was, every time, there's a joke that says that as soon as you get a little bit of extra money, all of a sudden there's a light that goes on in your car that says it got to be fixed, right? Like, I feel like it always happened to me. So I joined a member for Susu, and it was like 15 or 20 people in the group, right? I didn't know anybody besides the person who was an organizer. And I think I started out at $100 because I'm like, I can afford $100. And every week somebody came and I sent $100 to the person. And each week somebody gets the pot. So there's 15 people, $100. One person gets the pot the first week, second week, so on and so forth. And so while sometimes I felt like I couldn't save that amount of money in a week, I always, some people's like, oh, give me the last pot, like, give me the first pot. But people would do amazing things with that resource. People put down payments on their houses, people would buy cars, and that's really an investment club, right? And so those networks exist in our communities informally. And so being tapped into one or getting with a group of people you can trust, I think is a really good way of starting an investment account. We can do it with youth, right? They can have $50 and they can invest it away. So in looking at how they can invest that big, so if they get that $200 or $500, how can they invest that? And so I think you don't need a lot. You can start it really, really little to begin with. But they do exist in our community, but they're just called different things.
That's the exception, like she said, not the norm. If there's any other questions?
I did. First, thank you guys so much. Melissa, it's good to see you. And Angie and Juan, thank you so much for this today. As a white person that just ran a nonprofit for it feels like a million years, and what I learned is like, there's a lot of white saviors out there trying to do a lot of good work, um, and there's also like we all breathe the smog of white supremacy culture in terms of how these nonprofits work and how they get money and how they are able to operate. And so I'm really interested in how, like, what are we doing at I love these conversations about like the things we're doing at the grassroots level, like the sons and the ways to change things, but at the traditional level, the Rhode Island Foundation, or like other United Way, other ways, like what are we doing to completely disrupt the white supremacy culture that is the smog of those? Because just the fact of asking organizations to have to do the worship of the written word, to write these stupid grant applications, to then turn in the data on the right times. And what I want to do is give money to really incredible leaders, people that are in the community, are closest to solutions, and let them pay for operations support so they can actually make changes in your own community over long term. And so that is like, who's doing that? Like, who's going to get us there?
I forgot to. thank, thank you for that question. Two things I should have mentioned earlier. Um, you're completely right. I completely agree with you. Two things that we started recently at the Rhode Island Foundation in our capacity building team is one, there was after 2020, there were a number of organizations who really wanted to address systemic racism and wanted to do racial equity trainings, right? We got a slew of those requests. And so what we did is we structured a grant program that not only provided some resources to organizations, but also said, not only, we don't just want you to do a training and check off a box. We need to look at how what policies and systems are you going to change to become a more anti-racist organization. And so we had an open round of applications. Those applications are for organizations that are led by white people who have predominantly white staff members to become more anti-racist, right? Because we were getting overwhelming amount of requests for that. Two, we recognize it's well proven in Rhode Island that we don't have a lot of organizations that are led by nonprofit people who are people of color. And so on the other side, we provided a capacity building grant for organizations that are led by people of color and want to scale up their capacity, because it's apples and oranges in terms of the amount of resources that organizations that are led by people who look like you and I compared to the organizations that are led by people who identify as white. And so the capacity building grant is really looking at working with a cohort of, of organizations that identify as people of color, work with them over the course of 2 years, and helping them to stabilize their organizations, scale up their organizations, increase their resources, whatever they feel like they need to do for their organizations, and also providing them operational support money as well too for over the course of 2 years. And so that's what we're doing this year to move that needle, and also looking at feedback. And so, and also really listening to what nonprofit organizations that are led by people of color need, right? And so yes, you need money. Yes, you need to establish a nonprofit formally. You need to develop a board, whatever that is. We're going to help you through that over the course of 2 years, give you some operating support, and working with the white-led organizations over the course of a year in a group setting, saying, hey, you want to become more anti-racist. It's not just a DEI training. What else do you need to do to become more anti-racist? I would say the third thing what we did, I worked in partnership with the Rhode Island Foundation when I was at the United Way of Rhode Island for the COVID rapid response grants, right? There was like $9 million that we gave out, United Way and Rhode Island Foundation gave out to community. And what COVID did as a philanthropic organization is we had to move really quickly to get money out in the community. And so the application question was really 5 pages. Now, if you apply for other grant applications, it is like pages. The application to read to apply is like 28 pages, right? If you look at a federal grant application, it's 28 pages just to actually figure out what the instructions are, and then the application you actually submit is like 100 and change, right? We made the application really short, really quick, one report, right? All these things eliminate barriers. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But streamlining the process, making ourselves accessible, working with members of the community who are actually serving the community that they actually identify with, were some of the things that we started over the past year, because we had to be more nimble with the COVID, right? Unfortunately, because of COVID and everything else, we had to become more nimble. But I know that over the next couple of years, as we continue to get feedback, we will begin to streamline the process. So do we need like 13 pages of data or grant application? I don't want to read a 13-page application, right? You want to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, measure the impact, and let's go, right? And so that's one thing. But I know there's some amazing models nationally that we're also looking at the foundation to be able to integrate and embed in the DNA of our work as well.
Yeah, I want to add to that, Angie. I think you definitely nailed it around the COVID thing. I know for during COVID, I received a lot of panic emails and text messages for funders who were trying to get rid of money, and they were quick to want to bypass these processes, these terrible processes to receive money. You know, too often, small grassroots organizations that have 501c3s, for instance, like the Chad Brown Neighborhood Association, they are constantly overlooked as a viable nonprofit because they don't look the way funders feel comfortable. But this is a all black male run organization that's on the ground in the communities. They grew up there, they live there, and they serve there. And the fact that they have consistently been overlooked because the structure of their organization doesn't fare well in the eyes of funders is BS until COVID happened. When all the funders were reaching out to me saying, oh my goodness, we need on the ground grassroots organizations that are in the community, not organizations that have to develop relationships in the community. We have to stop pretending that these structures and processes are necessary, because they're not. It's just another way to push out nonprofit organizations that are run by and look like us, that impact and serve our community. So that's one thing I will say. The other thing that I will say, and this is a pet peeve of mine just because I ran a nonprofit again, is you see these small nonprofits. I loved partnering with smaller nonprofits because, again, they do have that connection that so often these larger white-run organizations don't. But they do have those capacity issues, as Angie was saying. You know, I would love to see the Rhode Island Foundation or the United Way of Rhode Island create some kind of like flexible shared service model for these small nonprofits, because they don't have grant writers. So when their grants come in front of funders, they're denied because it doesn't sound right. It's not written well. They can't afford grant writers. They can't afford IT services, right? So they're susceptible. They have high risks in so many different areas. They can't afford health insurance. They can't afford all these things as an individual organization. But if somebody created a model where they could share these services to reduce their prices so that their overhead made sense and they could afford to be maintained, I think that would be a fantastic thing. It's done across the country. It is not done in Rhode Island. So I think those are some of the ways that we can better support our nonprofits to be prepared to take on these grants and the ability to serve their community more effectively and efficiently and more broadband than they currently have the ability to do.
So I want to comment on that quickly.
Go ahead.
Because my former colleague and friend Larry Warner is not here to represent the United Way of Rhode Island, I want to speak to the last point that Melissa talked about, only because I knew about it when I was at United Way, is exactly the overhead for nonprofit organizations is really, really high, and it's often prohibitive for organizations. One of the things that United Way of Rhode Island is working on and doing a feasibility concept for is a nonprofit association in Rhode Island. One, because there isn't anybody who speaks in United Voice on behalf of nonprofits in Rhode Island, and it's the largest source of business and one of the largest sources of business in Rhode Island. And two, there's an opportunity to provide the back end support services that, like Melissa was talking about, that often handicaps and also challenges organizations. And so right now there is some survey work that's going to nonprofits to see how open they would be to having, like, if you're a small nonprofit, you may not have an HR director, you may not have a finance person, you may not have an IT person, but if you had a co-op model like Melissa referred to, and you paid one fee and everybody shared those services, it would help a lot of nonprofit organizations who are smaller to be able to do the work that they do, but not have to pay attention to, well, not have to really focus their energy and their monies on some of the other stuff. Like, one of the things that was a significant barrier to nonprofits is the audited financial statements. Like, if you're a small nonprofit, that's something that you just, it's financially, not feasible to do. But if you had a larger nonprofit organization that was sort of like your umbrella organization to do that, that would help us. So I know that's something that United Way of Rhode Island has in their strategic plan and is working on right now. So just a little plug for United Way.
No, thank you for the plug for United Way. I wish Larry was here to elaborate more on that. And thank you for that question, because that's kind of where I wanted to get where we were at. Uh, yep, yep, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Like I told you, I'm always bullied. Go ahead. Yeah, another one. Speaking. Green.
Hello. It's green.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Um, what we can do to kind of change some of um, the systems, I guess you could say. But I've been with an agency 20 years, and it's taken a long time to get to where I want to be. So I think I'm at the point where this is why I didn't want to be in the camera, but moving forward and finding my worth, because in order for me to move up, I was always told you have to go back to school, you got to go get your master's, you got to do this. But my peer didn't have their masters, they had their bachelors, and they were moving up into positions of managers and being directors. And then when I would question that, it would be like, oh well, you're causing problems, and you shouldn't be asking these questions. So I feel like there's a lot of agencies are going to have to go out and look for these talents, give people the opportunity, diversify their boards. I work for an agency, it's all white men, servicing like 50% of Latinos and other people of color, but they can't even relate to what's going on in the community. So those are the changes that I feel that really need to happen. Giving people the opportunity, making sure that they're moving up in companies. They have the skills. Why not? Why does it matter what you look like? Let's put people into positions and help us get wealthy like the rest of them. You know what I mean? So
Thank, thank you, Kenya, for that. And thank you, Jordan. Now I can even hear myself better. But back, because I want to hold everyone up. I know we're over time, and staff here wants to get home. But digging deeper into this, we could dig deeper into this rabbit hole, because one of the things that Kenya mentioned, I still haven't finished my undergrad. Right, I'm starting the foundation. Even some people like, you have the audacity to start a foundation? I said, why not? Right, because I have some skill sets to do it. I have access to people who have the knowledge to do it, and some resources. And so that's what I encourage others to do, is to dive in, learn as you go. And I love the fact that Angie mentioned what United Way, has in their plan. Because Melissa and I had talked about this in the past. We talked about co-ops, a nonprofit co-op, just to pool resources, similar to what they do with Chamber of Commerce, right? The businesses pool together so they can actually reduce costs. So why can't we do that in the nonprofit sector? I also serve as a trustee at PPL, the Providence Public Library. We have a development team. We have a grant writer and a library, right? Raising funds. And it's like, to have that capacity, to have that access, how do we get that access? Then I think you have AFP, which is, I think it's the Association for Financial Fundraising Professionals. So Angie and I were on a panel earlier this year, and one of the things is like, what can we do to help Black nonprofits? Sit on a board, bring your expertise on how they can raise funds, right? And like, you always want an attorney on the board, right? Because we can't pay for those services. So hopefully we have some type of advice with an attorney on the board. Why can't we have that particular profession on there? And then we also have Tech Collective, who also has folks that can sit on the board that can bring that TA and that support. So there's other creative ways to bring that capacity to your agency, but some folks don't think like that. So having organizations to help systemize that, even with what Andrew was talking about, leadership and people being overlooked, that's a big thing that's even discussed in some of my committees on their bypassing talent that's right in front of them. And then, like you said, you're making noise. Some people can't do that when they're collecting the check because they can't put themselves in that position. So I'm here to disrupt. So if you need me to come and do it, I'm not there. You know what I'm saying? So I'll speak on that behalf. That's why I sit on these committees, sit on these boards to talk to that point, right? And I'm not receiving money from you. I'm not employed by you, but I am getting feedback from folks that this is the direction you should go. So I'm going to end on that note. I'm going to one question in the back, and then that's going to be the last question because I know we got to get out of here. No problem.
Recently just started working with the African American Ambassador Group as the lead coordinator. I'm also
nice to meet you. I seen you in the Hollywood Square earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I also serve as a new pastor on the south side of Providence, at one of the churches on the south side of Providence. And I was just curious. Pastor Shane Lee was speaking about it, and just listen to everything else that was also said. About that education factor. Empowering our people. Giving them the tools to learn. And so I know the young lady earlier, she asked about her daughter who's already started a nonprofit. But then my question is, I guess, how do we connect, or who do we connect our people to if they haven't started a nonprofit and they want to start a nonprofit?
You can call me.
So I mentioned earlier, so if you go to museofri.org, we have a resource. And so actually, Melissa put together a really good guide on how you can actually start from a nonprofit. Yep. So you can actually, she also left some materials here to get started on that.
And Juan can give you my cell phone number too if you want to chat offline sooner than later.
Yep. And then so I'll definitely will connect. And then, but like it is, if you weren't in this room being connected to her, like that's kind of what happens. We get in these situations. So I'm trying to make it more broad access, not giving her number to everybody, but but give these resources that can guide them in that direction, and who to ask. Like even you said the education part. I'm self-taught most of this. Like so for my financial planning, I've taken some classes at Roger Williams, including one by Melissa, which is how to not run a nonprofit, even though it's nonprofit management. And it was a great course. It should have been a master's course, but I'm happy I got it in an undergrad. But just giving you different aspects and just really having the courage to dive in. Don't let anyone say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. As soon as you say that, I'm doing it. I'm just defiant like that anyway. But yeah, so I'm going to close with this. If you see the giving circle, so you're going to see this green circle, that's actually helping me raise funds for this foundation. For the MUSE fund that I want to establish with Rhode Island Foundation. And you're going to see it around the city. You're going to see this giving circle around the city, just like you see any other fundraiser. But you're going to see a lot of grassroots with me trying to raise funds for these type of initiatives. And hopefully what United Way is working on, I want to be a part of that. You know what I'm saying? That whole a group of folks together, because my organization will need those services, right? So the way I'm trying to start this foundation. And I really, really appreciate going on there, because we can get into the discussion of philanthropy so white. That's a whole nother conversation. You know what I'm saying? So, but those resources also will be on my website, so we can have those discussions. And hopefully we can have another discussion like this again, another conversation. But we can virtually. Everyone knows I'm accessible. I'm like the Tom of MySpace, but in Facebook. So you'll see my face on everyone's profile. But that's what everyone says. You're like the Tom of MySpace, people who remember MySpace. But yeah, we can engage in those conversations and really, really put it to the road. Like I love having the talks, but I really like to walk. Right? I really like the action steps and getting things done. So I'm very spontaneous and very Juan. You shouldn't do that now. Oh, I already started. Come help me. But I really appreciate everyone's time. And you can reach me at museofri.org. I want to thank Toonie, Jordan, and Amy here at Venture Cafe for providing the space. And I want to also thank my guests, including Melissa, out there in New York. I hope you buy me something and bring it back.
Absolutely not.
Well, why not? Well, then ask me, and Leah can give me something.
She'll bring you something back.
And I also want to thank Angie for coming, and Larry. Larry was he wanted to really be here. But everyone's accessible if you have any questions, but definitely bring those questions. I really want to dig down deep into some of the concerns that we were just talking about, and how can we build off that. So thank you, everybody. Everyone say bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.